Under Milkwood is a 1954 radio drama by Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, commissioned by the BBC and later adapted for the stage. A film version, Under Milkwood, directed by Andrew Sinclair, was released in 1972. An omniscient narrator invites the audience to listen to the dreams and innermost thoughts of the inhabitants of the fictional small Welsh fishing village Llareggub. They include Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard relentlessly nagging her two dead husbands, Captain Cat reliving his seafaring times, the two Mrs. Diebreds, Organ Morgan obsessed with his music, and Polly Garter pining for her dead lover. Later, the town awakens, and, aware now of how the feelings affect whatever they do, we watch them go about the daily business, origins and development. When Thomas was staying at Newquay, Cardiganshire, in West Wales, one winter, he went out early one morning into the still sleeping town, and verses came to his mind about the inhabitants. He wrote the account of this as a short story named Quite Early One Morning. He continued to work on the idea for the remaining 8 years of his life. In 1931, a 17-year-old Dylan created a piece from the Swansea Grammar School magazine which included a conversation of Milkwood stylings with Mussolini, wife Mr. Pritchard, and amp Mr. Ogmore. In it are lines which are nearly identical to those that would later be found in Milkwood. A year later, in 1932, Dylan talked at length with his mentor and friend, the socialist grocer of Bryn Mawr, Bertrick, about creating a play about a Welsh seaside town. At Bertrick's bungalow in Caswell, Gower, in 1933, Dylan read an embryonic Under Milkwood. In an interview with Colin Edwards, Bertrick recalls, "He read it to Nell and me in our bungalow at Caswell around the old Dover stove, with the paraffin lamps lit at night." The story was then called Llareggub, which was a mythical village in South Wales, a typical village, with terraced houses with one tie bark to about 5 cottages, and the various characters coming out and emptying the slops and exchanging greetings, and so on. That was the germ of the idea which developed into Under Milkwood. In Quite Early One Morning, there are numerous ideas and characters that would be further developed for Under Milkwood. For instance, the short story includes a 28-line poem, of which this is the 4th verse. "Open the curtains, light the fire, what of servants for? I am Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard and I want another snooze. Dust the china, feed the canary, sweep the drawing-room floor, and before you let the sun in, mind he wipes his shoes." Thomas wrote to his wife, Caitlin, towards the end of a long letter, "I finished that infernally, eternally unfinished play, and have done it in New York with actors." He had, in fact, promised to deliver the work on his arrival in New York on the 21st of April, but had completed it in the afternoon of the day it was to be premiered, only after being locked in a room to finish it by his literary agent Liz Riettel. The last lines of the script were handed to the actors as they were putting on the makeup. The same year, he read a part of the script in public for the first time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the Poetry Center. Soon afterwards, with others, he sound-recorded a performance at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, New York. On the 9th of September 1953, he delivered a full draft of Under Milkwood to the BBC as he left for a tour of America, intending to revise the manuscript on his return, but on the 9th of November 1953 he died in New York City. Thomas is reported to have commented that Under Milkwood was developed in response to the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, as a way of reasserting the evidence of beauty in the world. Llareggub. The fictional name Llareggub bears some resemblance to many actual Welsh place names, which often begin with clan, but the name was actually derived by reversing the phrase bugger all. In early published editions of the play, it was often rendered as Llareggub, similar A double G is not used in written Welsh. If the name were to be pronounced in Welsh as spoken in South Wales, it would be. The geographical inspiration for the town has generated intense debate. Llan was the village where Thomas lived intermittently from the 1930s. This town was probably the inspiration for the people of Llareggub, although the topography of the town is thought to be based on Newquay, where Thomas was staying when he started writing the play seriously in 1944. Both towns use the Under-Milkwood Association to attract tourists, hence the rivalry, and a Dylan Thomas Trail has been opened in Newquay. More recent research has indicated that most of the first half of the play was written in Southley, Oxfordshire, whilst the second half was mostly written in America in May 1953. Fewer than 300 lines were written in Llan. Thomas drew a sketch map of the fictional town. This is now at the National Library of Wales and can be viewed online. The name Llareggub was first used by Thomas in a short story, The Burning Baby, published in 1936. In the play, the Rev. Eli Jenkins writes a poem that describes Llareggub Hill and its mystic tumulus. This was based on a lyrical description of Tomb Balm's mystic tumulus in Monmouthshire that Thomas imitated from Arthur Mackin's autobiography Far Off Things. The town's name is the inspiration for the country of Llamedos in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. In this setting, Llamedos is a parody of Wales. Plot: the play opens at night, when the citizens of Llareggub are asleep. The narrator informs the audience that they are witnessing the townspeople's dreams. Captain Cat, the blind sea captain, is tormented in his dreams by his drowned shipmates, who long to live again and enjoy the pleasures of the world. Mog Edwards and Myrvan Price dream of each other. Mr. Waldo dreams of his childhood and his failed marriages. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard dreams of her deceased husbands. Almost all of the characters in the play are introduced as the audience witnesses a moment of their dreams. Morning begins. The voice of a guide introduces the town, discussing the facts of Llareggub. The Reverend Eli Jenkins delivers a morning sermon on his love for the village. Lily Smalls wakes and bemoans her pitiful existence. Mr. and Mrs. Pugh observe the neighbors. The characters introduce themselves as they act in the morning. Mrs. Cherry-O-And merrily rehashes her husband's drunken antics. Butcher Bainon teases his wife during breakfast. Captain Cat watches as willy-nilly the postman goes about his morning rants, delivering to Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, Mrs. Bew, Mog Edwards and Mr. Waldo. At Mrs. Organ Morgan's general shop, women gossip about the townspeople. Willy-nilly and his wife Steam open a love letter from Mog Edwards to Myrvan Price. He expresses fear that he may be in the poorhouse if his business does not improve. Mrs. Diebread 2 swindles Mrs. Diebread 1 with a bogus fortune in her crystal ball. Polly Garter scrubs floors and sings about her past paramours. Children play in the schoolyard. Gwenny urges the boys to kiss her where she says they give her a penny. Gossamer Bainon and Sinbad sailors privately desire each other. During dinner, Mr. Pugh imagines poisoning Mrs. Pugh. Mrs. Organ Morgan shares the day's gossip with her husband, but his only interest is the organ. The audience sees a glimpse of Lord Cutglass's insanity in his kitchen full of thyme. Captain Cat dreams of his lost lover, Rosie Probert, but weeps as he remembers that she will not be with him again. No good boy fishes in the bay, dreaming of Mrs. Diebread 2 and geishas. On Llareggub Hill, Mayrose Cottage, spends a lazy afternoon wishing for love. Reverend Jenkins works on the White Book of Llareggub, which is a history of the entire town and its citizens. On the farm, Utah Watkins struggles with his cattle, aided by Bessie Bighead. As Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard falls asleep, her husband's return to her. Mayrose Cottage swears that she will sin until she explodes. As night begins, Reverend Jenkins recites another poem. Cherry Owen heads to the Sailor's Arms, where Sinbad still longs for Gossamer Bainon. The town prepares for the evening, to sleep or otherwise. Mr. Waldo sings drunkenly at the Sailor's Arms. Captain Cat sees his drowned shipmates, and Rosie, as he begins to sleep. Organ Morgan mistakes Cherry Owen for Johann Sebastian Bach on his way to the chapel. Mog and Mavanwi write to each other before sleeping. Mr. Waldo meets Polly Garter in a forest. Night begins and the citizens of Llareggub return to their dreams again. Characters: Captain Cat, the old blind sea captain who dreams of his deceased shipmates and lost lover Rosie Probit. He is one of the play's most important characters as he often acts as a narrator. He comments on the goings-on in the village from his window. Rosie Probit, Captain Cat's deceased lover, who appears in his dreams. Mavanwi Price, the sweet shopkeeper who dreams of marrying Mog Edwards. Mr. Mog Edwards, the draper, enamored of Mavanwi Price. The romance, however, is restricted strictly to the letters they write one another and their interactions in the dreams. Jack Black, the cobbler, who dreams of scaring away young couples. Evans the Death, the undertaker, who dreams of his childhood. Mr. Waldo, rabbit catcher, barber, herbalist, cat doctor, quack, dreams of his mother and his many unhappy, failed marriages. He is a notorious alcoholic and general troublemaker and is involved in an affair with Polly Garter. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, the owner of a guest house, who dreams of nagging her two late husbands. She refuses to let anyone stay at the guest house because of her extreme penchant for neatness. Mr. Ogmore, deceased, linoleum salesman, late of Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. Mr. Pritchard, deceased, failed bookmaker, late of Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. He committed suicide, ironically, by ingesting disinfectant. Gossamer Bainon, the schoolteacher, dreams of a fox-like illicit love. During the day, she longs to be with Sinbad's sailors, but the two never interact. Organ Morgan, the church organ player, has perturbed dreams of music and orchestras within the village. His obsession with music bothers his wife intensely. Mrs. Organ Morgan, a shop owner who dreams of silence, as she is disturbed during the day by Organ Morgan's constant organ playing. Mr. and Mrs. Floyd, the Cocklers, an elderly couple, seemingly the only couple to sleep peacefully in the village. They are mentioned only during the dream sequence. Utah Watkins, the farmer, dreams of counting sheep that resemble his wife. Bucky Milkman, the milkman, dreams of pouring his milk into a river, regardless of expense. Mr. Cherry Owen dreams of drinking and yet is unable to, as the tankard turns into a fish, which he drinks. Mrs. Cherry Owen, Cherry Owen's devoted wife, who cares for him and delights in rehashing his drunken antics. Police Constable Attila Reese, the policeman, relieves himself into his helmet at night, knowing somehow he will regret this in the morning. Mr. Willy-nilly, the postman, dreams of delivering the post in his sleep, and physically knocks upon his wife as if knocking upon a door. In the morning they open the post together and read the town's news so that he can relay it around the village. Mrs. Willy-nilly, who, because of her husband's knocking upon her, dreams of being spanked by her teacher for being late for school. She assists willy-nilly in steaming open the mail. Mary Ann Sailors, 85 years old, dreams of the Garden of Eden. During the day she announces her age to the town. Sinbad Sailors, the barman, dreams of Gossamer Bainon, whom he cannot marry because of his grandmother's disapproval. Mayrose Cottage, 17 and never been kissed, she dreams of meeting her Mr. Right. She spends the day in the fields daydreaming and unseen, draws lipstick circles around her nipples. Bessie Bighead, hired help, dreams of the one man that kissed her because he was dead. Butcher Bainon, the butcher butcher dreams of riding pigs and shooting wild giblets. During the day he enjoys teasing his wife about a questionable meat that he sells. Mrs. Butcher Bainon's wife, dreams of her husband being persecuted for selling owl's meat. Dog's Eyes Man Shop. Rev. Eli Jenkins, the Reverend, poet and preacher, dreams of Ashtathfadai, author of the White Book of Llareggub. Mr. Pugh, schoolmaster, dreams of poisoning his domineering wife. He purchases a book named Lives of the Great Poisoners for ideas on how to kill Mrs. Pugh. However, he does not do it. Mrs. Pugh, the nasty and undesirable wife of Mr. Pugh. Diebread, the bigamist baker who dreams of harems. Mrs. Diebread 1, Diebread's first wife, traditional and plain. Mrs. Diebread 2, Diebread's second wife, a mysterious and sultry gypsy. Polly Garter, an innocent young mother who dreams of her many babies. During the day, she scrubs floors and sings of her lost love. No Good Boyo, a lazy young fisherman who dreams peevishly of nothing, though he later fantasizes about Mrs. Diebread too in a wet corset. He is known for causing shenanigans in the wash house. Lord Cutglass, a man of questionable sanity, who dreams of the 66 clocks that he keeps in his house, all telling different times. Lily Smalls, dreams of love and a fantasy life. She is the Bainon's maid, but longs for a more exciting life. Gwenny, a child in Llareggub, who insists that her male schoolmates kiss her where she says they give her a penny. Principal productions. Other notable productions. The play had its first reading on stage on the 14th of May 1953 in New York City at the Poetry Center at the 92nd Street Y. Thomas himself read the parts of the first voice and the Reverend Eli Jenkins. Almost as an afterthought, the performance was recorded on a single microphone tape recording and later issued by the Cadman Company. It is the only known recorded performance of Under Milkwood with Thomas as a part of the cast. A studio recording, planned for 1954, was precluded by Thomas's death in November 1953. The BBC first broadcast Under Milkwood, a new play for voices, on the third programme on the 25th of January 1954. Although several sections were omitted, the play was recorded with a distinguished, all-Welsh cast including Richard Burton as first voice, with production by Douglas Clevedon. A repeat was broadcast 2 days later. Daniel Jones, the Welsh composer who was a lifelong friend of Thomas's, wrote the music. This was recorded separately on 15 and the 16th of January at Larne School. The first attempt to bring the play to the screen occurred in 1957 when the BBC broadcast a televised version narrated by Donald Houston. The play won the Prix Italia Award for radio drama that year. In 1963, the original radio producer, Douglas Clevedon, revisited the project and recorded the complete play, which was broadcast on the 11th of October 1963. The 1972 film adaptation, with Burton reprising his role, also featured Elizabeth Taylor, Peter O'Toole, Glynis Johns, Vivian Merchant and other well-known actors, including Ryan Davies as the second voice. It was filmed on location in Fishguard, Pembrokeshire, and at Lee International Film Studios, London. In 1988, George Martin produced an album version, featuring more of the dialogue sung, with music by Martin and Elton John. Among others, Anthony Hopkins played the part of first voice. This was subsequently produced as a one-off stage performance for the Prince's Trust in the presence of H.R.H. Prince Charles, to commemorate the opening in December 1992 of the new Air Studios at Lyndhurst Hall. It was again produced by Martin and directed by Hopkins, who once again played first voice. Other roles were played by Harry Seacombe, Freddie Jones, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Sian Phillips, Jonathan Jonathan Pryce, Alan Bennett and, especially for the occasion, singer Tom Jones. The performance was recorded for television but has never been shown. In 1992, Bright Spark Productions released a 50-minute animation version using an earlier BBC soundtrack with Burton as narrator. This was commissioned by S4C. Music was composed specially by Trevor Herbert and performed by Treorchy Male Voice Choir and the Welsh Brass Consort. Producer Robert Lyons. Director Les Orton. It was made by Serial Productions in association with Onward Productions and BBC Pebble Mill. This was released on DVD in October 2008. DVD ref 5037899005798. In February 1994, Guy Masterson premiered a one-man physical version of the unabridged text at the Traverse Theatre, Edinburgh, playing all 69 characters. This production returned for the subsequent Edinburgh International Fringe Festival and sold out its entire run. It has since played over 2,000 times globally. In 1997, Australian pianist and composer Tony Gould's adaptation of Under Milkwood was first performed by actor John Stanton and the Queensland Philharmonic Orchestra. In November 2003, as part of the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Thomas's death, the BBC broadcast a new production of the play, imaginatively combining new actors with the original 1954 recording of Burton playing first voice. Digital noise reduction technology allowed Burton's part to be incorporated unobtrusively into the new recording, which was intended to represent Welsh voices more realistically than the original. In 2006, Austrian composer Ákos Banlaki composed an opera with the libretto based on the German translation by Eric Fried. In 2008, French composer François Narbonne composed an opera Au bois lacté, based on his own translation and adaptation of Under Milkwood. It was created at the Opéra Théâtre in Metz, France, with staging by Antoine Julians. The work is for 12 singers, large mixed choir, children choir, accordion, dancer and electronic sounds. In 2008, a ballet version of Under Milkwood by Independent Ballet Wales toured the UK. It was choreographed by Darius James with music by British composer Thomas Hewitt-Jones. A suite including music from the ballet was recorded by Court Lane Music in 2009. In 2009 and 2010, a translation in Dutch by the Belgian writer Hugo Claus was performed on stage by Jan de Cleer and Konda Sutter on a theatre tour in Belgium and the Netherlands. In 2010, a one-woman production of the text was performed at the Sidetrack Theatre in Sydney, Australia, presented by Bambina Boracha Productions and directed by Vanessa Hughes. Actress Zoe Norton-Lodge performed all 64 characters in the play, presented by the Ottawa Theatre School in March 2011, directed by Janet Irwin and featuring the graduating class of the Ottawa Theatre School, as well as other Ottawa actors. In July 2011, Progress Youth Theatre performed a stage adaptation of the radio script. All visual aspects, such as stage directions, costume, set and lighting design were therefore devised entirely by the youth theatre. The voice parts were shared equally among 7 actors, with other actors playing multiple named parts. The BBC Formula One introduction to the 2011 Singapore Grand Prix features extracts of the audio for their opening VT. In 2012, the Sydney Theatre Company staged a production starring Jack Thompson as first voice and Sandy Gore as second voice, with a cast including Bruce Spence, Paula Arundel, Drew Forsyth, Alan John, Drew Livingston and Helen Thompson. The production was staged in the Drama Theatre of the Sydney Opera House. In 2012, Gould's 1997 adaptation of Under Milkwood was again performed by actor John Stanton as part of the Victorian College of the Arts Secondary school's inaugural performance at the Melbourne Recital Centre. Gould played piano and worked with the students as a musical mentor. Guy Masterson of Theatre Tours International has produced and performed a solo version of the play over 2,000 times since its world premiere in 1994. It has been performed at the Edinburgh Festival in 1994, 1996, 2000, 2003, 2007 and 2010, in Adelaide, Australia in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 and 2012, and in London's West End Arts Theatre. In October 2014, the BBC launched an interactive e-book entitled Dylan Thomas, The Road to Milkwood, written by John Tregenna and Robin Moore. It deals with the journey from Swansea via the BBC to New York City and beyond. Quotations. To begin at the beginning, it is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black, the cobble streets silent and the hunched quarters and rabbits wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow-black fishing boat bobbing sea. Opening lines, spoken by a first voice. We are not wholly bad or good, who live our lives under Milkwood. Prayer of the Reverend Eli Jenkins. Black as a chimbley. A no-good boyo is up to no good in the wash house.